Hi there, welcome back. This next session is being run in conjunction with the RNIB, and I'm hoping Sonali can join me here. Hi Sonali. I don't know if you can see me. Good,
Hi.
good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Great conference, really
Thank you
good
very much.
sessions.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to this one as well. I'm jumping into this bit. Firstly, to say thank you so much for setting it all up, but also just to warn you that we're really being very strict about the timing. So I know that we're starting a little late as well. So I'm afraid you're going to have to finish on time. So not too far off, but just to make sure that that was clear. Just had a couple of other sessions that have overrun. So you've got another amazing panel. I don't quite know how you pull it in. These are all the people you work with through the RNIB, I guess, is it?
I think they're kind enough to work with us, so
Okay.
I'll have to give them all the credit.
Nice. Well, it's another fantastic lineup. So thank you so much, and I look forward to watching the session. So over to you and the panel.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, welcome to the session on accessible entertainment. I'm Sonali Rai from the RNIB. And this is the very first time in my 44 years that I'm joining a conference from my breakfast counter. So here I am sitting in my kitchen because this is where I have the brightest lights in my black dress. So I must admit it does help with the nerves. Really excited to host a panel on making TV more accessible for people with sight loss. We will discuss audio description on TV and beyond. There are other updates, especially one that we at the RNIB have looked forward to for a number of years, and that's the accessible TV devices. So this year we saw the launch of Channel 555, the home of accessible TV guide on Freeview Play. Then we saw Samsung receiving its tried and tested accreditation, and we've got the Fire TV built in on Freeview, which is fantastic. I know in America you've had it for a long time, but in the UK it's still a new thing. And I think Peter Korn is hosting a session on Fire TV right now. So had they sorted out cloning, I probably would have been there and here. The TVs sound great. Not had a chance to try them yet, but hopefully soon once the lockdown is over. And as much as we've talked about video on demand, personalization recently, I think the conversation about accessible TV devices has been going on for far longer. So accessible content is great, accessible apps are great, but first of all, you need to be able to switch the TV on, find channels to watch, switch between apps, and do everything independently. So hopefully, I promise a few more such developments in the coming year. We have a fantastic panel of experts who will be updating us on what they've done in the past year, especially during the series of lockdowns that we've had this year. But let's start with some very quick introductions so everyone knows who's in the room. Stephen, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Stephen Scott. I'm a broadcaster and I work at RNIB, and I also work at AMI in Canada, Accessible Media Inc., making accessible programs are all about technology.
Thank you, Stephen. Richard, do you like to go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Richard Kurzik. I'm the BBC's Senior Service Assurance Manager. So I look after the delivery and the production of access services for our public service broadcast channels and our iPlayer online service.
Thank you, Richard. Jonathan?
Hi, everyone. My name's Jonathan Penny. I head up ITV's in-house audio description department. I've been working on ITV content for a couple of years now, and before that trained in audio description at Red Beam Media.
Thank you. Kathy, do you want to go next? Oh, you're on mute.
I really didn't want to be the first one. I am Kathy Taylor. I work for Ofcom, who are the UK's communications regulator. I particularly look after our work on accessibility, but also diversity in broadcaster work. Forces. So those two come together quite nicely here, I think. In terms of visual description, I am in my mid-40s with blonde hair. Back to you, Sonali. Thank you.
Larry, over to you.
Thank you, Sonali. I am Larry Goldberg. I'm the head of accessibility for Verizon Media, which is a division of the global telecom company Verizon. and I am a white male over the age of majority, wearing a black t-shirt with a red check on it, the Verizon logo. Prior to working for Verizon Media and Yahoo, I was with WGBH Public Broadcasting in Boston, where closed captioning began in the US, as well as video description, or if you like, audio description or descriptive narration. Take your pick.
Great. Thank you, Larry. And a very warm welcome to everyone. So the plan now is that I will summarize the feedback that we've had from viewers with sight loss since the lockdown started. And there has been a lot, I mean, way more than any other year, I've been told by colleagues on the front line. But don't worry, I won't speak for too long. It is a tight summary. And then I'll request everyone to give us an update on what they've been up to. So on the feedback from end users, and broadly, there are three key areas of concern. I'll start with VOD, which obviously, I think that has generated more queries than anything else. So video on demand, and the top concern within video on demand is box sets. So regardless of whether they are on broadcaster-led services, so for example, the iPlayer, ITV Hub, All4, My5, or a subscription-based streaming service, Netflix, Prime, Disney, Apple TV. So if it's on catch-up on a broadcaster-led service, most services seem to be doing fine. So if a program, drama, documentary has been on linear television with audio description, you'll find it will be on catch-up with audio description as well. This also applies if it's original programming on a subscription-based service. So if it's a box set being premiered on broadcaster-led service, particularly if it's a big box set or acquired content on a subscription-based service, for example, Homeland, Walking Dead, Downton Abbey, those are the pain points. Invariably, AD is not available on premiered content or acquired content on subscription-based services. And I think that there are plenty of examples, but I think Stephen will be going through them, so I won't. There were also complaints about random episodes falling off the grid. So for example, episode 1, 2, and 4 will have description, but not 3. And the good thing there has been how promptly the broadcasters have responded to these complaints. So often a user will log a complaint about an episode. We know it's a mistake because the rest of the series has been described. And within 24 to 48 hours, you'll see that the episode has gone up with description. Now, in an ideal world, this wouldn't happen. But it does remind me of the time when I started working for RNIB, and we regularly had similar complaints about linear television. So AD on digital television was just developing. Random episodes were falling off the schedule. Now, we've not had those for a number of years. In fact, I can't remember the last time we had such a complaint. So I'm hoping we're in a similar phase for video on demand. When we emerge on the other side, like we've done for linear, the service will be stronger, more stable, and reliable. I think the main question here is how soon can we get there? The second biggest concern is about consistency of experience. So regardless of whether I'm using iOS, Android, or connected television, I want to use audio description, but I also want to navigate and find content independently, which is not happening right now. The market is still very, very fragmented in this respect. So voiceover must be used, or voice guidance must be used. The app should work with these different screen readers. And the third and the final point I will highlight is, again, one that reminds me of the time when I joined RNIB. There is tremendous amount of feedback that's coming through on the quality of audio description right now. And not just the audio description, but also the general approach to making content accessible. And I think the credit for this goes to the service providers, the broadcasters and the streamers who are really engaging with viewers right now. So hosting focus group sessions, user panels. I hope Jonathan will talk about the work he's been doing at ITV in this space. But since March, the start of the lockdown triggered something. We have seen tremendous changes, broadcasters focusing on specific content in these sessions, and others like Sky, who host sessions periodically. They invite all their describers to these sessions. They've got their users there. And viewers are using these to talk about all sorts of things. So the narrative, the style, the voices they like, what could have been described better. And it is a discussion. It's not a one-way conversation. I can't forget the cheer that Neville Watchurst received when he introduced himself at the first Sky session. For those of you who don't know, Neville is the describer who did Game of Thrones. So definitely fan following there. And another thing that becomes quite clear from the feedback is that people do want to watch different types of content, so not just on TV and not just 2D format. And that's where XR access comes in, because that's catering to content beyond television. At this point, I think, Stephen, I'd really like to bring you in, because I think we've had a lot of conversations over the years on audio description. I used to call them weekly therapy sessions at one point. So how do you think it's going?
Well, firstly, thank you for asking me to do this. I come here as a broadcaster who works at RNIB, but I want to present this as a personal story, because this is my life as much as it's my work. I talk about this on my shows regularly, and it's an area which I am very passionate about. My sight got worse in the last 3 years, particularly, and I started to lean more on to audio description. And it got to the point where if a show doesn't have audio description, I don't watch it. Now, it's not because I don't want to watch it, it's because I just can't. It's just not going to work for me. I'm going to miss too much. And a show without audio description is nothing to me. I think about the movie WALL-E, for example. I remember watching years ago, tried watching it again recently, and I got nothing out of it, except the memories, of course, of the first time round. But because it's a fantastic soundtrack, there's nothing else there. Brilliant, beautiful soundtrack, but that's all it is. It doesn't have any impact beyond that. I want to start off, though, with an acknowledgement. And Sonali, you picked up on this, and I think it's important that we acknowledge, and I want to personally acknowledge the work that's been done by all the broadcasters out there, whether linear or on demand or streaming, who have put so much time, so much effort, and so much work into making content audio described. A deep and heartfelt thank you to all of you for that, because it does make the difference. It does allow us as blind and partially sighted people to be part of society, to be able to have those water cooler moments with everyone else when we talk about that program last night, whether it be the new series of The Crown on Netflix that everybody seems to be telling me to watch. I haven't watched a single episode yet, but I will, because again, it's audio described, it's available to me as it is everyone else. I'm able just to join in that conversation and talk about those things. And, is Olivia Colman the right person to play the Queen? All these questions everyone else is asking each other. But of course, there are frustrations in all of this. And the frustrations are around availability. And that's the key area I want to focus in on today, because availability is the real challenge for me as somebody who wants to sit down and enjoy great content. The first question I'll always ask myself, and my wife and I do this all the time, we sit down to watch something on TV, and most of us do this, don't we? We sit down, we look at the list of programs, and we decide what to watch. Well, for us, there's a first question, which is what do we want to watch? And then what can we watch? And it's easy to get into the habit of saying Netflix provides lots of great content with audio description. So does Disney Plus, so does BBC iPlayer, so does Channel 4, so does My5. But the problem is we don't think in terms of channels, do we? We think in terms of programs. So someone says, there's this great show, you'd love it. It's on Amazon Prime, and I go to Amazon Prime and it doesn't have AD. That's a problem. That's a challenge. And the problem there is obviously I can't watch it. I'm not going to be able to enjoy that program or that movie or whatever it might be. And the irritation and the frustration that comes with that is often partnered with the fact that the audio description is often available. So there are shows that have been audio described, perhaps on the same channel that's providing it on their particular platform, but without audio description on that on-demand platform. And that's really frustrating, because I'm in a situation where a show has been on a channel, be a network channel, and then it's available on an on-demand player, but it's not got AD on it. And that's a real frustration. Let me tell you the Outlander story. So my wife loves Outlander. Well, she wants to love Outlander. Let's put it that way. Outlander is, of course, a big show, a huge program from the States. And it features apparently a very hunky Scots person, not me. And what is interesting about this program is she's fallen in love with it for, I guess, the fantastic storyline, nothing to do with the hunky guy, but she wants to enjoy this program like everyone else. And she watched a bit of series 1. She managed to enjoy it without much AD. She managed to watch it on her phone up close to her. But when the second series came along, that series included a lot of French dialogue. so she couldn't understand what was being said, and she couldn't follow along with the subtitling. She needed audio description, and her sight was getting worse as well. So by that stage, she really needed the AD. So I went off on a bit of a hunt to find it. I went off to find Outlander with audio description. And so far, I've come up short. I've been to stores where they sell the DVD. I've been on Amazon Prime, which hosts the entire series. None of them have AD. And I've even found it available on Channel 4 with AD. Brilliant, you think? Oh, he's found it. Yes, but only after it had been broadcast. And this goes back to my key point. So Outlander has been broadcast. Series 2 had been on. I think we were up to series 7, episode 7 by the time we got to it. And that entire series wasn't available on demand. There was only part of it available on demand. So I think from episode 4 onwards. So she had to make a decision. Does she join at episode 4 and just try and catch up? Or does she give up and wait for it to become available somewhere else? Well, of course, it's not going to become available anywhere else, is it? And that's the problem. So there are lots of issues there. And I understand there are lots of challenges. And I understand that it was Channel 4 that did the description. So whatever channel originally created Outlander, didn't do audio description, but Channel 4 did. And then Prime got hold of it, but they don't get access to that. This maze doesn't really work for us as blind people. We need everybody to come together more on this. There needs to be a standard set, something that says very clearly that there is one path for all of this content to get to, and that there's an understanding in the way that we've done with books at RNIB. We've talked about books and bringing it so that, the same book is available in, different formats around the world equally. That has to apply here, because this frustration has to end. And it ends with us working together, and it ends with all this wonderful content that you guys are doing, you're making. It's available. Make it available on demand. It makes it available to all of us. Sonali.
First, before I start talking, you need to unmute yourself. I keep reminding myself. Thank you, Stephen. I think that was great. And we've talked about this. So we understand the barriers going from broadcast audio description. So putting the description on video on demand doesn't always work because it's a different version. So you probably need to look at a mezzanine format. Try and look at scripts. Can they be exchanged? But yes, I completely agree. I think there needs to be more collaboration between the different providers. Yeah. I mean, the number of times I've answered questions about Friends. Why doesn't Friends have audio description? Because it has been described so many times for UK television and on different channels. It's been on, I think it's been on Channel 4, it's been on Channel 5 with description, but still not available. So definitely a need for more collaboration. Richard, just going back to the last point that Stephen made about making more types of content accessible as well. So that is something that BBC does quite well. I know you'll be giving us a roundup of the past year, but I just wanted to highlight the culture and quarantine content, which received a lot of attention, and I think that was brilliantly done. I'm going to stop there now because I really don't want to steal your content. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sonali. And Stephen, I hope to pick up on some of the issues you raised as well in what I'm going to say. So it's been quite a big year. There's been one probably big event for the BBC this year, which is of course that it's the 20th anniversary of audio description being broadcast on the BBC as a formal service. So in the last 20 years, we've AD'd about 45,000 programs. Now it's fair to say there's been other events, COVID, and it's been quite an experience for the BBC, and I'm sure my colleagues on the panel as well. There's been lots of changes, and the pace has been quite relentless, and we've had to get used to new ways of working, and sort of those things that were in the future that we were working towards have been sort of brought towards us, and we've had to react to that. So, going back to March, what the BBC were doing, we were doing things like bite size, helping with homeschooling with our daily bite size programs. We were one of the broadcast destinations for the government's daily briefings, and we had all the analysis around that. And then also side to that, we had, there was a big push to create a sort of compelling offer to the audiences whilst they were staying at home. And from an accessibility point of view, we needed to react to that. So we subtitled all the bite-size daily videos. We live signed all the government daily briefings. It's something we can continue to do today. And with audio description, we really needed to look for opportunities where we could add value. And so as you said, Sonali, with the culture and quarantine, whilst the theatres were closed, we decided with AD we needed to look at interesting, new interesting things to do. And culture and quarantine, there was a whole series of Shakespeare plays, and all those were audio described, all those were audio described on iPlayer. And culture and quarantine, like a lot of our stuff, was it's going to be a series of programs that were slated for broadcast in the summer. And all that was brought forward and was placed on iPlayer, and these are the things we had to react to. We also had a load of box sets that came onto iPlayer, a load of legacy programs that were broadcast. If viewers watched BBC4, they would have seen EastEnders 2008, which is, so would have had some of our legacy AD. And to date, I think it was 5,100 episodes of EastEnders have been AD'd to date. Now, our activities, we've been hugely supporting our activities by our access service provider, Red Bee Media. So right at the start of lockdown, they moved pretty much their entire production workflows, including their AD voices and scripters, to become home workers. There's obviously challenges around that, but it's testament to the work they've done. In fact, that all our access services, our audio description, our subtitles, our signing has been pretty much unaffected. So, to date, we've audio described 2,800 programs this year. So by the end of the year, we're on track to audio describe about 3,000 programs. You can compare that to when we started doing AD in 2001. For the entire year, we managed 482 programs. So there's been a huge, jump in the amount of audio description that we can do, even in a pandemic. So there's definitely been a lot of change. There's also been quite positive change as well. So, over the years in the BBC, and certainly whilst I've been involved in access services, there's been a sort of, a growing awareness of the benefits of AD from our commissioners, from our producers, from our channel teams. And and during lockdown, I think we really crossed this tipping point where the requests for programs to be AD'd were coming from those teams that were involved in producing the content, and that's really beneficial for AD production to have that, that increased engagement. And that was certainly true as well of culture and quarantine. It was a load of 3-4 hour plays, and the commissioner discussed with me whether or not these could be AD'd because she saw the benefit in them carrying AD. So there's obviously been a lot of changes, and whilst there's been huge disruption for traditional broadcast media, there's been a lot of work that's gone on in the digital space. So in the first week of lockdown, for example, there was the iPlayer Kids app was pushed out to all the users so children could have their own view of iPlayer. We've also done a load of work on subtitle improvements within iPlayer, their increased improvement, and for audio description. And I think this is important, picking up on your point, Stephen, is about how you find it, availability. At the moment, the iPlayer app isn't quite as good as it could be in terms of the user journey. So there's been a lot of work in improving that, and how to, how you select the next program, how you find the last program with AD, because that's not quite as good as it can be. And we've got experimental controls in the iPlayer app at the moment. So there's been quite a lot of challenges. There's been a few successes as well in the access service space, and where we're going on, and picking up on your point, Stephen, there is availability of AD, and it's something that we need to get better at. Certainly within the BBC, and when you're talking about broadcast services, you have to wait for a program to be broadcast before you get the audio description. That's a real focus for us now. So there's been updates to our scheduling systems, and so currently we've got a number of scheduling systems, one that does broadcast, one that does on demand, and the links between them are tentative at best, and so there's been a lot of updates in the scheduling systems we use. So now, we can really delve down and we can realize what the scheduling intention of a bit of media is going to be, and it informs how we're going to schedule access services, subtitles, or description, signing, and we can track that, and we can make sure that, obviously, you shouldn't be waiting for broadcasts, and we need to look at ways to target our resource and make sure that, those series that people want to watch are, do have those accessible services, when they're box setted or when they're broadcast first. And it's something, so, that, it's part of the development. And looking forward, over the next year, that user journey, we hope to get these, continue developing the iPlayer controls, that we're looking at platforms as well, which are underserved certainly by access service availability on the iPlayer apps, and of course, looking at how we're going to be developing AD for the next 20 years. Cheers.
Thank you, Richard. Lots of impressive stats there. I was just noting down the stats. I'm going to be using those. I hope I'm allowed to do that. Just one quick question, and it's about, it's something that we've encountered quite often, and I'm sure you've come across this as well. It's about comparing level of accessibility on BBC, or for that matter, any traditional broadcaster, so any PSB, with a streaming service.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because we at the RNIB have seen accessibility of services grow over the years, especially on linear, going back to when no one knew what AD was, to building each workflow to almost near perfection. I think when it comes to linear, I say almost near perfection, to where we are today. I think I find the comparison quite puzzling, but I don't work for a broadcaster, I work for a user organization, so I can understand that perspective. I wondered if you had any thoughts on this.
Yes, so I mean, we always, I mean, as the BBC, we always get compared to our competitors, and that's a natural thing that would happen. What I would say is that, that of course there are places that we can compare our content and our offering. Of course, iPlayer, online streaming service is similar to Netflix or any other streaming service. We carry entertaining content, I hope, and we carry dramas, documentaries, things, so you can compare the offering in a content sense, but that is kind of where where the comparison sort of ends. So if you look at everything that, say, the BBC does, live news, live sport, regionality, nations, regions, all of that, we have this huge amount of content which is completely that a commercial streamer wouldn't touch, or isn't producing, or because they have a very different remit and a very different audience. They're looking at those global audience, where we're looking at those national, regional, or British audiences. So there's also a point about how, certainly with audio description, what we're doing with audio description. So our AD team, obviously it's provided by Red Bee Media now, but there's members of staff there. There's a core member of staff who, there's a team that used to work for the BBC and were part of the AD team in 2000, in the initial inception. So, there's a real consistency of approach. And I think Stephen said about, I think maybe it was you, Sonali, said about, consistency of experience. If you're selecting audio description from the BBC, I'm sure, with other UK broadcasters as well, you will get a consistent approach to how AD is offered to you. So the voices will be familiar, the description style and the scripting style will be familiar, and you can compare that then to Netflix or other global streamers who procure AD in a completely different way. So some of it will be from the BBC. So, you know, I turned on Peaky Blinders on Netflix last night, and it had BBC audio description. I turned on The Crown, and I think it was perhaps a synthetic voice, or it was, you know, it was something else. And then, you know, then I turned on another program, and there was an American audio description voice, you know. And absolutely, you know, I'm not saying that one approach is better than the other, but, you know, the consistency of approach is certainly, you know, if you know what you're getting with the BBC, whereas you know what's been offered by Netflix and other broadcast or other streamers is slightly different. So yeah, I mean, you know, and I think, yeah, it's important to say, you know, that you have to draw the lines to where you can compare and where you can't. And, you know, and I think where we should be comparing is definitely, are we audio describing the correct things? You know, and is completely picking up on Stephen's point, you know, huge series like Outlander, and you can't find the audio description. So absolutely there, you know, this is where, you know, the BBC, and I'm sure everyone else, you know, we should have our feet held to the fire to say, this is, you know, these are the sort of shows, this is where the audience want to be, and this is what you should be describing. And so I think that is where I would like to be compared with everyone else, and certainly with all our rivals and across the market, I'd be happy to be compared with there.
Thank you very much, Richard. I'm sure Netflix will have a view on this as well, a different view. But everything sounded great except for The Crown. The Crown has actually been described by Veronica Hicks.
Oh, right.
So Veronica Hicks, the intonation and delivery is so perfect that, yeah, she's not going to like it, but I'm going to try and keep this to myself.
It was otherworldly. And it's not a criticism. It was fantastic.
No, I think that was a great point about diversity of content. And at this point, Jonathan, I would like to come to you. So from your point of view, you're an audio describer yourself, and you've had vast amount of experience. What do you think of the state of access services at ITV? What have been the highlights for you this year?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think, well, before I get too much further, as you say, I'm an audio describer, so I should have started by describing myself in my introduction. So I'm a slim white male, I've got short brown hair, I wear glasses, and for probably the first time this year, I'm wearing a white shirt today. So, you know, we've all been able to smarten up a bit. Yeah, as I said, I think I said in my introduction, we're quite unusual, I think, within the UK at the moment. We're an in-house access services team at ITV. And we've been a part of ITV for nearly a year now. We, in audio description, and our colleagues we work obviously very closely with in subtitling, found that our service delivery wasn't impacted too much by the pandemic. We had a setup which was weighted, you know, quite strongly towards home working anyway. And while we had one or two hastily assembled voice booths at people's houses, you know, we were very fortunate to be able to continue to provide AD relatively problem-free. And this is, you know, all against such a fantastic backdrop of accessibility and access to information kind of taking on a very real new importance, you know, across all forms of media, really. So as with, you know, I should think quite a lot of other broadcasters, our schedules were kind of quieter, with more repeats going out and fewer new programs to describe, you know, especially in those first few months of the lockdown. So the last few months have given us a chance to make headway with a few kind of longer term projects, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So back in March, remember March, we launched our Audio Description Users Forum, which is a permanent focus group for people who use our service. So we meet every couple of months virtually, of course, and discussions have ranged from kind of editorial aspects of AD to technical problems and lots more in between. A lot of our reporting, you know, internally and externally, as I'm sure Kathy will touch on later with Ofcom, is based on statistics. And you know, it's this forum's been a really useful way to gather more qualitative feedback in a regular way, you know, and also to make changes based on what today's users want their AD to provide. So one of the biggest problems one of the biggest projects, sorry, I've run with this group has been about diversity, and specifically how successfully visual diversity cues are conveyed by audio description. I think the generally adopted practice in the UK has been sort of leaning more towards describing a character's race when it's relevant to the plot. And it's become clear that this is problematic. It can create issues about what's left out of the audio description, you know, with a kind of implicit norm or something like that. And in practice, you know, many describers have found themselves actually avoiding describing race because of a lack of clarity about how best to do it. So for us at ITV, in the year that, you know, Black Lives Matter has come to the forefront of the national consciousness, I think it's really fitting that we're addressing this. So we carried out quite an in-depth consultation with users, with describers, and with volunteers from ITV Embrace, which is a network for employees from a BAME background. And we're now implementing a specific editorial policy to reflect our commitment to more effectively audio describing on-screen diversity. The audio describer's role has always been about choosing what is relevant for the visually impaired audience and conveying that. And this consultation has reinforced that the visual information that's relevant for the AD audience isn't limited to the plot of a program. AD users deserve the chance to build their own picture of how well a broadcaster is doing in terms of its, you know, driving change in its on-screen diversity. And if that isn't addressed in the audio description, then users can't make that judgment. So it actually links back to, you know, to this idea of the speakers at this event giving a visual description of themselves. You know, it's not strictly relevant to the content of my talk to know what I look like, but it's visual information that's there, and it does have a wider relevance and an interest. So it's quite a nice illustration. One of the other things we're looking at is we're currently in discussions about providing audio introductions to accompany our ITV drama series. So this is a technique that's inspired by theatre audio description, and we envisage creating original short form content to provide a spoken overview of a programme's visuals. Users would access it online, meaning that they could begin an audio described drama already having a much more detailed provision of description than is possible within the programme due to the time constraints. It would also, you know, as a secondary benefit, it would give us the chance to better implement the results of the diversity project, as we'd have the space to give a full and an equitable description of each character's visuals. So this is still early days, but I think it would be a real compliment to our drama series, and I hope it's something that eventually will be adopted further afield. With the user demos we've done with this so far, there's a really clear consensus that it would be an enormously enriching service, which would, you know, really increase engagement with a program. Onto our VOD platforms, which have been touched on already. At ITV, we're currently working towards greater rollout of AD on ITV Hub platforms. But right now we're in the throes of development work to bring AD functionality to BritBox, which, you know, for users further afield is a cross-broadcaster streaming platform. BritBox AD is aiming to launch before the end of the year, and is likely to begin with the mobile version of the platform, but ultimately extending onto all versions of the platform. We also hope that the work on BritBox will lead to progress in areas of our hub agenda as well, particularly around, you know, browser and connected TVs. From a content point of view, obviously BritBox is a joint venture, so, you know, I won't speak for other broadcasters, but at the launch, my team's hoping to be delivering AD on around 45% of the ITV content on BritBox. So lastly, we've also made changes this year to enable audio description to be scheduled and delivered on promos on ITV. So that could be program trailers or brand spots. And I think if there's time later, we might be able to play you one of those. We're not seeking to work to a specific volume. We're just hoping to provide AD where it's needed. So for any promo that has strong visual content or unvoiced on-screen text, we're hoping to be delivering our first broadcast promo next week on an ITV brand spot campaign. And I think this, for me, is my kind of take home from my first year at ITV is that we're starting to influence areas of the business beyond our sort of core remit of audio describing programs. So, you know, we definitely still have plenty of things to fix, but I hope that I've kind of outlined that we are doing some exciting things in terms of widening our reach. You know, whether it's kind of bringing access services to more internal and external content, or lending our expertise in accessibility to colleagues in other teams like product teams or marketing teams. I don't think accessibility's, you know, ever been higher on the agenda for ITV than it is at the moment. So thank you. Sonali, back to you.
I'm on mute. Sorry. Thank you, Jonathan. I think that was really, really helpful, but I am going to reserve my questions because I've just been reminded that we need to pace it up. So anyway, so I'm switching sides from creativity to legislation. We're often told that legislation is, it's for compliance. It doesn't necessarily support innovation, which is needed in this space. At RNIB, we strongly believe in innovation. For example, we believe in innovation and obviously legislation. So the perfect example of legislation is the Communications Act of 2003, which mandated description and linear and really made the service more stable and standardized how much AD we're going to get on the service. But in 2020, there are leading video on demand services that do not support access services at all. And I do need to address this elephant in the room, which is Sky not delivering any access services, or at least no audio description on Now TV or the Sky Video on Demand platform. So I really think legislation in this area will be very, very important to bring in standardization. So Kathy, can I bring you in at this point to talk about what you've been doing this year?
Yes, of course you can. I'm rather upset to be in the regulator camp on the opposite side to creativity, but never mind. Yeah, I'll talk through some of the broader work that Ofcom's been doing in relation to accessibility for both people with sight impairment and hearing impairment. But I did want to note a real sort of tension we've seen over the last few months, which I think others have alluded to, which is that broadcasters are under really quite significant pressure in terms of resource, whether that's people or and revenue or processes and places. Although I know that in some ways it's opened up space for people, there is a lot of pressure there. And yet on the other side, audiences are really reliant on television and online services more than ever, you know, stuck at home. And I think Ofcom's research earlier in the year showed that in April, people were watching over 6 hours of television or online services a day. So that's about 40% of people's waking hours spent, you know, using these services, television or otherwise VOD services, to be entertained, to be kept informed. You know, it's absolutely vital, and particularly so for people, I think, who are more isolated, perhaps older, with disabilities. As you said, there are requirements for broadcasters to provide audio description. And actually, we've just put out a report at the end of October on how people have done for the first 6 months of this year. And it's been really impressive, I have to say, that despite these challenges, almost every broadcaster has met its statutory requirements for audio description and subtitling. And if they haven't quite met it, they're on course to do so by the end of the year. So that's been really positive, I think. You know, as we've talked about, you know, we don't really regulate for the quality of audio description or subtitling. It sounds actually from what you said earlier, Sonali, that's also quite a positive story over lockdown. But I think what we have been doing is revising our best practice guidance, where we really try to provide that sort of standardized guidance to broadcasters on, you know, what audience preferences are in terms of both style, which programs to audio describe and gist. And we're just doing a bit of research, quite an extensive research project, to look actually at what's already out there, what's already known, and bring that all. We're also doing a survey of BSL users, for example, to look at preferences in that area. I think you mentioned as well all the menus to get to content in the first place in your opening, Sonali, and it's worth mentioning that we do have requirements for EPGs, electronic program guides, to be made accessible to people with sight impairment, which includes things like text-to-speech functionality, magnification, and so on. You know, that is a long and complicated process. Probably can't go into it now, but it's worth noting that there are requirements for people to do that where they can. Going back to all those people sitting at home watching, you know, spending over 6 hours a day in April watching television, we found that a lot of that could be accounted for by rises in the amount of people subscribing to subscription VOD services. So what everyone said, the sort of prominence of the box and importance of the box set, I think you said it, Stephen said it, that is really vital at the moment. So it's really, you know, I think that's doubled the number of people watching here. And also older audiences are watching those services more and more, according to our research. So, as you say, this issue of standardised provision of audio description and the other access services on VOD is really critical for us at the moment. And you know, Sonali, we've been working with government for a couple of years now to get these regulations into law here. We're really quite far along that track. We've just got our second consultation responses, and we're going to make recommendations to government in the new year. I should point it, I suppose the point to make is it is much more complicated than broadcast television, and many people here know that sort of in a lived experience kind of way a lot better than I do. But there are so many complicating factors to do with the way in which VOD services are distributed over lots of different platforms, say, that make it fairly difficult to encode that in law that then ends up being proportionate and realistic. But it's what we're working on at the moment. I think it will, you know, it won't be in place for this pandemic, but I'm hoping that it will be in place for the next one.
Hopefully not. Hopefully we're not going to wait until the next pandemic.
Yeah, it's going to be sooner than you think, Sonali. I'm banking on another one next year, so you know.
Thank you, Kathy. I think that was a great summary. And yes, I think it becomes quite hard for us because we're a user organization, and there's only so much we can do to encourage broadcasters to start paying attention to the needs of people with sight loss. And we do keep going back. Most of the broadcasters are great. They do tend to work with us and they listen to what people have to say. But there are times when you just feel, okay, you need more help. You can't just keep pushing.
Oh, sorry, I butted in.
No, go for it. Yeah.
Some people are already doing really well on their on-demand services. I should say that it doesn't always take legislation for people to do this, and there's a huge amount of goodwill and effort going on. It's just that consistency and the fact that as a sort of viewer, you can't rely on that stuff being there at the moment, and you need to be able to really. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's my point, Kathy. Sorry to jump in for a second, but I think that's exactly what I'm wanting to get across from this, is that, you know, there's so much great work being done, and in most cases the work has already been done by all the broadcasters. And I can only imagine how frustrating it must be for the describers themselves to learn that the program they've worked on isn't available on those other platforms and available. And you hear all these blind people coming at you saying, "Well, I can't watch this show," and it's done. You know, so it's that's where a lot of the frustrations lie, I think.
I'm going to have to move on now because I think we've got Larry waiting. And by the way, I completely agree about introducing a threshold, but accessibility is just more, you know, isn't just about TV programs and films. I think, yes, obviously it's got significant take up, but there are other services. So you've got theatre, you've got arts, you've got the TV ads. You've got so many more Christmas TV ads this time with description on television than ever before. And then you've got gaming. So, and there's this one almost format that crisscrosses most forms of media today, and that is the immersive content. We are content agnostic when it comes to making it work for people with sight loss. And on that note, I'd like to bring in Larry. Larry and his team at Verizon Media and Sharon Azencote from the Cornell Tech have been doing fantastic stuff on the accessibility of extended reality. They've created this incredible coalition of researchers, academics, developers, designers. And we were fortunate to be a part of some of the working groups in XR Access. And you had these brilliant people joining in with their updates at every monthly meeting. Larry, you'll have to stop me there because I will take over and just talk about XR Access then.
Well, I just want to talk about audio description on linear. That's where I came from. It's interesting to listen. I was there at WGBH when Descriptive Video Service was launched in 1990. That's 30 years ago. And oddly enough, with some British imports, packaged as Masterpiece, Theater, and Mystery. We had a tremendous amount of technical hurdles to overcome. And I don't think we ever believed that we would see the amount of description that's available today, even a lot of it by voluntary efforts, which I used to think was a oxymoron, because no one was going to do anything voluntarily. But look at all the streaming services and the vast amount of description today. And then I hear Stephen say, sure, there may be 50,000 hours available, but it's that 1 hour that I want. And that's not a technical hurdle, that's just process. All the technology is in place to make that work, especially if something's already been described. Now look, it took from the 1930s to 1990, 60 years to make television accessible. And when I moved from public broadcasting to digital to Yahoo and now Verizon Media, my mind began working in this world of what's next, what's next? What are we going to solve next? And with a number of like-minded people, we realized with the emergence of immersive media, virtual reality, augmented reality, if we didn't start looking at how we're going to make that media accessible as soon as possible, we're going to be stuck in that same problem, the problem that any user of description today is finding, and beyond that for all disabilities, is a new technology that everyone is all excited about, but not for you. So we pulled together a coalition. We called it the XR Access Initiative. We had a symposium 2 years ago, and with Cornell Tech, a university in New York City. And we must have hit a nerve because a lot of people came together and said, absolutely right, we have to start working on this now or we're going to be too late. The gaming community, as you mentioned, had already been working on this. The gaming community is very tight. They feed off each other. They know what's possible in their technology. But we were looking at, yeah, but what happens when this gets mainstream? When the larger community of media consumers starts using XR, we call it shorthand, for education, for employment, for training, and certainly for entertainment across the board and not just gaming. So we pulled together a pretty interesting group of people from industry and Google and Microsoft and Facebook, Oculus, and from academia, from universities really all over the world, with a concentration of academics from the UK, and most importantly, users. And we had just a great representation of users with disabilities who were developers, who were users, were researchers, and who really knew what might be needed in this next generation. And we're looking at things that, in fact, do need to be invented, unlike consistency on description across streaming platforms, where nothing needs to be invented. People just need to get their act together, create a clearinghouse. But how do you get a 360-degree immersive environment accessible for a blind person using haptics and description and beacons? And the challenge was fascinating. That's one of the reasons I think people came together. It's like, let me roll up my sleeves and figure this one out. And in fact, we've made some great progress. We've got a great immersive captioning group have come together to come up with really, really interesting ways of presenting captions when you're in an immersive environment and there are people talking to you from all different directions, near, far. We've got some great prototypes on that and some tech behind it. And we're also looking at, how we're going to make an immersive environment accessible through recorded or even live description. We're absolutely looking at machine augmentation, artificial intelligence, machine learning. want to make sure it's the quality is provided, but also the techniques which we'll learn from where we've been already in linear and digital and on demand. But let's go beyond that. We have an opportunity now with a pretty wide open space using both AR and VR to think about some new and interesting ways of presenting accessibility in this new form of media. It's been really exciting. You can see where we've been on our website at xraccess.org. And following this past summer symposium where the information input was so tremendous, we put a pause on rolling out our regular meetings and said, we need a strategic plan, which will be announced Friday of this week. You're the first to know. The XR Access Initiative Strategic Plan for early 2021 and beyond is really ambitious. It'll be open for feedback. You can see it on the XR Access website. And we're going to have a form for you to read through the entire strategic plan for near term and long term, and then give us the feedback so we can hit the ground running in 2021, get funding to actually accomplish some of these pretty far-reaching plans. So we really are looking forward to going public on Friday and getting input from near and far.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Larry. I think that's brilliant, and I will be looking forward to the strategic plan. Anything that comes from you is ambitious, Larry. I've taken it for granted.
If you're not an engineer, but you know tech, you might believe, as I do, anything's possible. I'm sure those engineers will figure it out. Worked so far.
It definitely has. And on that cue, I think unfortunately, we'll have to end the discussion. We've got a lot of questions, but there is no time. I will take the questions away and try and come back to maybe Mark or Catherine with the answers. I'll obviously reach out to the broadcasters. But just a very quick thank you to everyone for taking time out. I know how busy you all are, so this is very much appreciated. And to all those who are listening, have a safe year. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Television screens light up in unlikely places up and down the country, on rocks by the sea at night.
Who can tell the story of us?
More TVs illuminate the Angel of the North, a field of wheat, a flock of sheep and a fish and chip shop on a high street. Excerpts from hit UK programmes.
What tells us more about who we are than a dream?
Britain's Got Talent on ITV.
A kiss.
BBC Fleabag, then a bake-off collapse on Channel 4.
Or a tragedy. What makes us feel more at home than a pub?
You all think you're so perfect.
EastEnders.
A street.
How dare you come digging around in my past?
Coronation Street.
Or a school.
Derry Girls.
No one ever asked if I needed help.
Stories change things.
Cockcroft, who takes the goals for Great Britain.
Help us see the world differently.
The future of humanity now depends on us. The oceans are under threat now as never before in human history.
This is our story.
Don't matter if you're the richest person in the world.
Our tears.
From a sombre Paul Merson to a sports studio celebration.
Our smiles. Our truths.
I think all you can be in your life is honest with yourself.
This is the story of everything we've done. And everything we could be.
Channel 5's Yorkshire Vet.
Forming that bond that will last a lifetime.
This is us. This is who we are. And our stories are your stories.
A sun-strewn cityscape. BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5.